Like I read a book this summer called Breath, and it was all about how I've been breathing wrong my whole life. Mainly mouth breathing versus like breathing in the nose. And you might think, well, what on earth does that have to do with Judaism? But Judaism cares a lot about how we breathe. Because, the word for a life or a soul, a neshama, also involves the word breath. Right? It also involves breath. So, and in many ways, I find myself focusing a lot on my breathing these days. Not that I have trouble breathing, but when I get upset or I get frustrated, I pause and focus on my breathing. So we're going to do a little bit of that. Robin, I'm going to borrow this Sidor for a moment. Okay, so find yourself a comfortable position. Again, there's no right or wrong way to sit for our meditations. I'm going to focus on, Andrea, good to see you again. Figured it too cold to go to the Upper West Side today. Yeah, 21 degrees outside. Okay, so focusing on our breath. One of the first things that actually people say when they recite traditional prayers in the morning is a passage that says that Eloheinu shama shenatata bi tehorati, the soul that God gave me is pure. And one of the ways that God made it pure was that God breathed it into us. And so find your position, close your eyes. And as you focus on your breathing, try your best only to breathe in through the nose. See how it makes you feel to allow that air to come up through your body that way. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Eloheinu shama shenatata bi tehorati, the soul that you, my God, have given me is pure. You might have some ambivalent feelings about souls. You might believe you have one. You might believe you don't have one. But I like to describe the soul as just a metaphor for whatever is the best part of you that nobody else can touch. So try and visualize that for me. Think about the part of you that you feel is the absolute best core of who you are. What nobody else can touch. Maybe it's something that a loved one has regular access to, or maybe it's something that only you share with yourself. Focus on that image and allow the breathing to let you focus on it. Eloheinu shama shenatata bi tohorahi. How often on a typical day do you feel like you get to access that best part of yourself? When does it feel easier? And when does it feel harder? When do you feel invited to draw it in? And when do you feel like you're forced to push it away? Breathe in, breathe out. Eloheinu shama shenatata bi tohorahi. Now think about what it would be like if you spent more of your day reaching for that best part of yourself. How would you behave? How would you speak to other people? How would you use your time? Because if you don't tend to that piece of you as best you can, it's pretty hard for you to do it for anyone else. Then breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. We're now going to do a 10-minute silent sit. Sit however you'd like. And again, if it's a long time for you, just bring yourself back to your breathing when you feel like you're starting to waver. Just take deep breaths through your nose. feel ready, you can open your eyes. There's no rush. It's 10:23, so stretch or just take a bio break. We're going to pick back up in 7 minutes at 10:30. If you haven't been here before, there are bathrooms 1 floor down and 1 floor up. For reasons passing understanding, there are no bathrooms on this floor. Make sure for 10:30 you have a siddur and a chumash. 1 blue book, 1 red book. And feel free to talk. Bum, 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 bum. That's what's most important, if it worked. If you have a Siddur, open up to page 83. And most people here are open door Shabbat regulars, but as a reminder, once a month, we take it much slower so we can start to like get a feel for what exactly is going on in the Siddur. And we run through one little piece of each part of the service, and we just keep going and going and going and going and going over and over again until hopefully one day we'll understand all of it, which might not be ever, but we can dream. So today we're going to talk about page 83, which actually is a song we don't really sing it here. We do it quietly, but it's called Baruch She'amar. So I'm gonna sing it to a melody to sort of pick it up, which I'm gonna try to do other weeks. But I want us to think about what this prayer is about, and why we might sing it. Some of you probably learned to sing this song in whatever synagogue you grew up in, and it often had like a very I don't know the best way to describe it. It would be a very like official sounding prayer, like Baruch She'amar B'Hayahu. Yes, I see people nodding here. There's nothing wrong with that melody, but I'm just doing one that's a little bit slower. Baruch She'amar B'Hayahu Baruch Hoseh Bereshit Baruch Omer V'Oseh Baruch Gozer Umekayem Baruch Merachem Haaretz Baruch Merachem Abriyo Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov L'Reah Baruch Adonai V'Kayam L'Netzach Baruch Hodeh U'Matziyo Baruch Shemo. Now you can't give me a fake answer to this question. What is this prayer about? You can't say God. Okay? Every prayer in the Siddur is about God. That's a wrong answer. The only wrong answer is that it's about God, because any prayer in the Siddur could be about God. What is this prayer about? Yes, Ron. Sorry. Praising God. Yeah, so the word that occurs here the most, right, is Baruch. And you'll notice, by the way, that in that first passage that we just did, every line starts with Baruch, and none of them contain what? I don't know. Yeah, none of them contain any variation of how we might call God's name in the Siddur. So that's not that normal to say that. It's like a lot of synonyms, right? It's, praise is the one whose word created the world, right? Praise is the author of creation. Well, you can just easily add God's name to any of these, right? Like, it wouldn't be that weird to just add God's name. So, like, why leave it out? In the bottom, that's God's name. The bottom paragraph, that's God's name. But like, why do all these lines and just not have like God's name mentioned there at all? It's not an easy question. let's look at it a different way. Does anyone here ever get bothered when people sort of casually say things in conversation like, oh my God, maybe even invoke like Jesus Christ, sorry God. But like they just sort of casually use these words in conversation. Does anyone ever get bothered by that? I get bothered by it a little bit. Maybe I'm the only one. There's a lot of significance in Judaism to say God's name. You're not just supposed to like casually throw it around. That's why there are some times where you'll hear people not even say it, even when they're pronouncing it. So, like, if I were demonstrating how to say a blessing, you might hear someone say Baruch Atah Hashem, which actually is not God's name. Elokeinu, Melech Haolam. You probably heard someone say this before. That's actually not God's name. Well, we wouldn't avoid saying the name unless there was a reason why we wanted to do that. And in most situations, in casual conversations, because, well, if you believe in God, then it's not something you just kind of want to throw out as a word like all the time. That seems like a strange choice. But in this case, it's building up to something. It's building up to the last paragraph. And, this is where every time we do this part of the service in Open Door Shabbat, admittedly this is only the second time, so to say it's every time is probably inaccurate. But 2 is as much of a pattern as we've got. I like to tell you that the part of the service that we're focusing on right now, what's known as Pesukei de Zimra, the passages of song, was, believe it or not, added to prepare you for the real part of the service. Now, some of you, your initial reaction to that might be like the first time I ever heard it, which is, wait. So, I go to synagogue, and it's way too long. It's way too long. And I find it a little boring. You're telling me that someone's solution to the problem of making a prayer like service more boring was to add more prayers. And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I am. That is what happened, thousands of years ago. It's partially why I don't mind us taking the time to not do the whole thing, because the goal is to prepare. You could argue there would be other great ways to prepare for prayer other than saying more prayers. Nothing wrong with that answer. But in a sense, we're not saying God's name at the beginning of Baruch Shemar because we're sort of building up to it. Don't just throw it out there. Really mean it when you say it. And I like this because one of the things that prayer is supposed to remind us about is to be very careful with words, which is not something that people are great at. What are some ways that people are not great at being careful with words? Now, I know you all have answers to this one. What are some ways that people are not great at being careful? I'm sorry? Yeah, okay, so we talk about other people, behind their back. In Judaism, really, gossip, whether it's true or not, is not condoned. So even if what you're saying about someone else is accurate, it's not necessarily good for you to gossip about them, so we do that a lot. What else? Other ways that we're not careful with words. Say more?
When you're angry, you'll often say things that you mean in ways that you didn't mean to say them. They come out hurtful, or they come out, right? That's not exactly what you mean, but definitely exactly what will hurt the other person the most.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Aaron?
Yeah, arguing. When you're arguing with somebody and it gets too far and you're just saying whatever you think will win the argument or convince the other person or shame the other person.
Yeah, I learned that there was a term for this recently that I have definitely been guilty of for points in my life. That sometimes called like debate team energy. Has anyone ever heard this expression? Okay. I heard the first time I saw it in an article, it was about our vice president-elect. This is not like a political statement about who our vice president will be, but that I think he was a college debater and was reasonably good at it. And so apparently, and the article said that he brings a lot of debate team energy to arguments, which I was like, I've never heard that word before, but I understand what it means. I do understand what that term means. And I have definitely exhibited in my life some debate team energy, but at least just being a naturally argumentative person may not hurt people, but people with that kind of energy can definitely figure out the right way to hit you in the wrong way. Other ways that we're not careful with words? Yeah, Aaron, again.
Writing on the internet. If we think we're anonymous, we might say something we wouldn't if it were attached to our name.
Sure, anonymity. You know, there's a story on Reddit. I think I talked about the story Reddit before, right? It's very active. Occasionally, I advertise things for the shul on a story on Reddit. I don't use Reddit that much, but I do have an account. And I think that it's important to advertise things where people aren't expecting to find you, because that's the only way you'll find new people. So I do it on Reddit, and you'd kind of be amazed at the comments I get about it. I mostly laugh at them, you know. People like, if any of you are Jimmy Kimmel fans, you never saw these mean tweets thing, like you bring someone on and you have them read mean tweets about you. It's like, it's very easy to do that. And cheap. You know, like I've always wondered, like, I don't know how one would measure such a thing, but as it became easier to reproduce words, did people start talking more or talking less? Because remember, like, it used to not be easy to like share words out. You had to like write it on a parchment with like ink and like a quill. That wasn't so easy. And then one day you had a printing press, and then one day words were basically free, which is basically what it is on our phones. So like, does that mean we use a lot more words? Maybe. I don't think it means that we use better words. Sarah, I thought you were about to say something.
Well, my life as a single parent with a child around, because in a New York apartment, remembering to be careful about the words that you're saying. Children hear more than we learn to do. So the concept of being careful with words is a big part of my life.
Yeah.
Especially with a child, like mine is very curious and wants to debate. So, what am I talking about? Where am I talking about it? How am I talking about it? Something I can never consciously.
Yeah, I mean, people who have young children or had children or are thinking about having children, you know, they hear everything. Even if you have a good reason for it. Like I definitely recall, I think it was either my child number 1 or child number 2, I don't honestly remember, but they were about the age of my youngest now, like let's say around 3 years old, and I was living in an apartment, and I have very large feet, and often I've stubbed my toes. It's true for everybody, but I always felt like it was a curse of having really big feet. And I definitely had like a painful stubbing of the toe. And, you know, I stubbed my toe and I was just like, shit. And I just kept like, it really was painful. Then the next day, said child was going around the house, you know, saying like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Don't worry, it's okay. Sorry. I'm not, you know, that I'm saying it in the sanctuary. But like, that sort of mimicry is real. And it's there, you know. And that, by the way, is even if you're being careful. Because in Sarah's example, she's like being very careful, you know. I had a good reason, you know, to like say that. I would argue that it's better to say that when you stub your toe than, I don't know, like throw something against the wall or like punch your hand into a door out of frustration. Like, there's a lot of really bad ways to respond to that. I would argue that saying shit isn't actually that bad, but it is if I don't want a 3-year-old to start walking around the house saying that over and over again. So like, we're not so careful with words in lots of ways. Allie, were you raising your hand or you were? Oh, no, okay. Yeah, what's up?
One way I feel like I have to be careful with words is like promises. Like, it's easy in the moment if someone needs something or something needs to be done to commit yourself to doing something. It's then hard to follow up with action.
Yeah. By the way, right, you know, it's a little bit not accurate to call like Kol Nidre the most important service, but you probably heard somebody in your life describe that Kol Nidre is the most important service on like the night of Yom Kippur. Anyone remember what the Kol Nidre prayer is about? Yeah, it's basically like all the promises that we've made over the course of the year, either intentionally or unintentionally, are null and void. It's sort of like what Liz is alluding to here, of like, you know, we're not very careful that we kind of need a fresh start.
And one thing I've been intrigued by speaking to children is how if you say like, oh, we will go get bagels for breakfast tomorrow, and then something comes up and you can't do that, children will say, you lied to us, you lied. And it's an interesting interpretation of
It's true.
speech and promises are true.
Bagels are a very sensitive subject in my house right now. I'm fortunate to live 3 blocks away from what is generally considered one of the best bagel places in all of New York. It's called Absolute Bagels. You might have seen it, you can follow the news that a few days ago, Absolute Bagels was completely vacated, and it's possible that it's closed and never coming back. So we're mourning in my house over. We're mourning in my house over these bagels, and they are very good. They're really, really good bagels, so you know. Yeah. But yes, I mean, but actually, that's it. It's interesting in terms of what you said about when you say that, and then your child says you lied to me. That's sort of like Amy's comment about like a person knowing just the right word to sort of like push a rhetorical button. Like, you know, because I guess it would feel bad if they said you promised, which in a sense is also true. If you say, I promise to take you to get bagels, and you say, but you promise, and it's like, well, lie is a very interesting choice of word to use. Yes?
I was going to go back to your story about your toe and kid. I mean, you said, the way you said it was you don't want him running around saying that in the house. But what you really mean is you don't want him saying it outside in public.
No, fair enough.
I think about, I mean, going back to comment about with the internet, ease of disseminating the words. Is it the things you say in private or the things you say in public? How is the audience?
Yeah. That's a fantastic distinction, right? Like, yeah, I guess I was more worried. I probably was more worried about, you know, him going to preschool and starting to say that, when someone, you know, takes one of their toys And then, then saying that word in the middle of it, like, what are those people teaching their kids up there in their house? So words are very careful. Abraham Heschel says that words are like vessels. They're like vessels of the Spirit. And that, we know that God considers words very important from the creation story, which is actually in this prayer. Why do we know that God considers words so important in the creation story? Rafi?
Because God created the world with words.
Right. Right. God doesn't when it says God creates things, it doesn't actually say it doesn't mean really in a physical sense. It means God verbally said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So there is something powerful actually about that. The choice for the creation story to involve words as opposed to physical building. Because there are other ancient traditions that describe God's creating the world with their hands or with like physical structure. By the way, in the Christian Bible, in the book of Revelation, it says, "In the beginning there was the Word," and then it says, "In the beginning there was the Word." So it actually is also unified there, like that God created the world by using words. Therefore, we should be mindful of our words. It's actually one of the reasons that some of you who are here today, I see every week, almost every week, multiple times a week, in synagogue context. It's one of the reasons I really encourage people to not feel like they need to overdo it by getting through every prayer in the prayer book. Because I would argue that one of the ways we're also not careful with words is in a prayer context in sort of what I would like to call the mumbling part of the service. Right, like you could argue that the speed with which one goes through prayer silently is not really being careful with words either. And in fact, it's one of the biggest. I would argue it's one of the bigger turnoffs to being in synagogue in the first place. It's like there's a bunch of people mumbling stuff. So sometimes you just need to slow it down to be a little more careful about it. Because there's no mitzvah for being the person who recites the most words in the least amount of time in the prayer. There's no mitzvah about reciting the most words in general. And so when we listen to Baruch She'amar and we start off, in some ways, it's sort of entering us into this conversation about the words we use. By the way, if you look at the notes on that page at the bottom, it describes how that is what was really traditionally considered the first public prayer in like a service in ancient times. It was the first prayer. So you can imagine that when people are coming together, the first thing you would say is, really, we're here to like focus on our words. Take it slow. Okay. Staying on time. Does anyone here, especially I'm curious people who regularly attend synagogue, have a strategy for how you look at words in the prayer book? Like for someone who does not just like to go through as many words as possible at once, Does anyone have a way that they? That's kind of what I want to close the loop on this. Or this is partially about feeling demystified about being in a sanctuary. So surely there has to be a way to do that that involves saying words are perfect. Some of which you don't know, some of which you understand, some of which you might be confused by. Raphael, I saw your.
A few minutes ago, I had an experience. I'm fortunate that I have enough Hebrew background that some of the words that I read resonate with me. And I was reading one of the Hebrew documents that says, Shatar Milei Torah. And I look at so sometimes I look at the English translation to help me understand the words, and sometimes it clicks. So the word tarbilenu means that we should become familiar with it. And I thought about that word, and regel means leg, and becoming familiar with it, walking in those words, makes me understand why that root from regel leg means to become familiar with. And just all that familiarity with the language and seeing translations, which is always interpretation anyway, makes me appreciate the prayers that I'm saying. And the next step for that, for me personally, is that my family, my mother taught me words, and that's the kind of thing that I can call her about and say, oh, I noticed this prayer, and she's going to appreciate that conversation. So look at the translation and my familiarity and letting those together.
Beautiful. I love it. Anyone else? Anyone else have a? You don't have to have an answer. You might not. You might have never thought about whether or not you have a strategy for it. But it's funny because I would say it's a core challenge for almost any person in a synagogue, which is like, what am I to make of all these words? And depending on what synagogues you're familiar with in your life, some use more words than others. Some do more things silently than others. We have a lot of people in our congregation who they grew up in a synagogue, and the synagogue used a lot less Hebrew than we do here. So it can be a little bit whiplashy to have that much more. So you were raising your hand, Lou? Yeah, I mean, it's not a race. Tefillah is not a sprint or a race. There are no awards for finishing first. There's no punishment for finishing last. So, going at one's own pace is important because I've seen people, and it's not easy when you're the one running things to figure out when you should keep moving on or not. But, I've definitely seen people from my perch, right? It's clear that they haven't finished something, and when I move on, they stop whatever it is they're doing and move on to something else. And so one of the things you want to disabuse people of the notion of is that you don't have to do that or lose time. If you're not done, keep on going. Keep going until you're done. Don't feel like the rest of us have to, there's nothing wrong with standing up when everyone's sitting down. There's nothing wrong with being, 3 prayers behind when everyone else is ahead of you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's at your own pace. Any other? Yeah, Amy?
So funny that you say that. I read Hebrew very slowly. I read it fine, but very slowly. And I have adopted a strategy where I'll read parts of English because I know a much faster English reader and quiet. Right? And so I try to go down this week I'm reading this part, this week I'm reading this part, this week I'm reading this part, so that over the course of time, like I get to work through, to be honest, like the high holidays, we are saying, say that we got in particular 12 times in 3 days. I can really get through the whole thing over the course of 3 days with no problem with great intent and concentration and thinking about what the words mean and what are the words that I'm familiar with and what are the words that I'm not familiar with and all the, I have a master's in linguistics, so I spend a lot of time playing with the language and then I get lost in the prayer. And so I try to keep away from that by doing some of it in a language where I spend less time playing, more time just reading, like, that's a strategy that I've definitely adopted. I definitely never thought, well, you can just sit there and play on the all day, that'll work.
Sure. Yeah. Some people who may have heard me mention this before. That's why I like, we've done this with other prayers, which is why I said, if you look at a prayer, any prayer at all, you can ask yourself, how would I recite this prayer if I really took its meaning seriously? But you can ask about any prayer in the Siddur, no matter what it is. Even if you don't believe it, it's still a question. You can say, how would I take it seriously? But I say this because, there are a lot of passages where we really allow words to affect you. Well, how would you recite it seriously? You'd say it slowly. You'd pour over it for a while. Like, these are not like small things that are mentioned here. It's not like reading like a phone book or reading like a grocery list. Not that those things aren't important, but like they're not things that when you read them, you need to like pour over what the deeper meaning of 4 onions and 3 tomatoes means. But when it says like, praise be to God who like spoke and the world came into creation, that's not something that is only a few words, but it has a lot of other meaning in it. Other suggestions, by the way. This is sort of related to what Amy said. Like, just pick one. Just pick something different each time to focus on. Like, again, no one's really testing you or looking over your shoulder on what it is that you are doing. The reality is that most people would have no idea what the other person next to them is doing with the Siddur, unless the person next to you is your spouse or your child or someone that you're actually talking to in services. Chances are the person in front of you or behind you really has no idea what you're thinking as you go through it. So focus on one part of it. Focus on one part of it and ask yourself, what am I doing? If it means you do a little bit less, do a little bit less. Do a little bit less. I also will not notice. There's no way for me to notice up there, and even if I did notice, I don't think that's really much of a problem. I should have worse problems in the world than people spending, time deep in thought about one line of the Siddur. There's a lot worse problems a rabbi can have in that. So, but again, it is a part of those words. So we don't really think about, both how significant the words are of a prayer book, but also how hard it really is to make our way through them. Then we'll never get more comfortable in synagogue, which is why we have open door Shabbat in the first place. We ultimately have a way to feel okay with all that. With that, we're going to read a little bit of this week's Torah portion. So if you don't have a red book, you should go to the back and get one. We'll see it at the moment. I will.
So.
Oh, that's embarrassing. I didn't open the article. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. In my haste of all the things going on here this morning, I forgot to unlock the ark.
Another big contest, God wasn't available for us.
Exactly, precisely, Amy, exactly. Well said. Well said. For those who got here at like 10 o'clock, you saw that at 9 o'clock we had our Pathways of Judaism class meeting here. So I've been here since a little after 8. So I forgot to unlock the ark. The Torah service, sorry, Rafi, begins on page 139 with Ein Kamocha. Ein Kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai v'ein k'ma'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'kol dor b'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam bo'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom Parachamim heitim b'birtzon ka'et Zion Tibnei chomot Yerushalayim Tibnei chomot Yerushalayim Ki v'cha levad batachnu Melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim. We rise, page 139, as the ark is open. Good morning, Steph. Vayibim Saharon vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai v'yachutzu oidecha v'yadusu misanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato Be'anarachet V'lishmei Kadisha Yakira Anamar Tushvechan Yeherava Kadama V'tiftach libi v'oraita V'tashli mishalin delibi V'liba v'chol amach Yisrael L'tabul chayim v'lishma Amen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Gadol Adonai Iti Unaram Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Tula, Ve'agivura, Ve'hatiferet, Ve'anetzah, Ve'hahod, Ki Kol Hashamayim U'Ba'aretz, Adonai, Allah, Ve'aminaseh, Le'kol Le'rosh, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'yishavahu, L'Hador HaKadoshu, Romenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'yishavahu, L'Har Kodesh, Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. You may be seated. And while we're just preparing for the first Aliyah, I'm going to give you all the handouts for today. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Vayishlach. It is probably most famous for two things. One is it's when Jacob, Yaakov and Esau reunite after Jacob flees for fear that Esau will kill him after he steals the birthright. And it's also well known for Jacob wrestling in through the middle of the night in a mysterious thing that then gives him the name of Israel, which is where he gets his name from. Okay. As we read the three Aliyot we're going to read this morning, I want you just to think about a question. You can use the handout to help you, or just think about it yourself, which is most Jewish commentators say that the thing that Jacob is wrestling with at night is an angel. And then he gives the name of, and then that's why he gets this name of Yisrael, which is one who wrestles with God. So here's my question for you is, what does it say about our relationship with God that name is based on the idea of a Jewish person wrestling with something divine and hidden? In other words, what is that supposed to signify when you consider the fact that divine beings are supposed to be powerful, and so we're actually wrestling with them and win? We'll come back to that in a moment, but I'll let you chew on that for a few moments. Whenever you're ready.
David Ben Yankel, Kohen, Baruch Shem Torah Lo Israel B'Kedushato, V'Atan Hadrekim B'Adonai Lechem V'Kolchem Hayom. The first reading is on page 214 at the top.
Amen. Vayisu mi beit el vayihod kibra ha'aretz lavo Ephrata v'til Rachel v'tkash b'lidata v'tkash b'lidata v'hiba ha'shtata b'lidata v'tomer laha ham yoledet al tiri ki gam zalach pain vayihi b'tzeit nashaki meta v'tikra shemo Benoni v'aviv kara lo Binyamin
ותמת רחל ותקבר בדרך אפרתה היא בית לחם. ויצב יעקב מצא בעקורתה היא מצא בקבורת רחל עד היום. וייסע ישראל ויט אהלה מהלה למיגדל עדר. ויהי וישכון ישראל בארץ ההיא וילך ראובן. וישכון וילהב פילג את אביו וישמע ישראל. ויהיו בני יעקב 12 בני לאה בכור יעקב ראובן ושמעון ולוי ויהודה ויששכר וזבולון. בני רחל יוסף ובנימין. ובני בלהה שפחת רחל דן ונפתלי. ובני זלפה שפחת לאה גד ואשר אלה בני יעקב אשר ילד לו בפדן ארם.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו נתן לנו תורה אמת וחיו אלון נתן וחיינו ברוך אתה אדוני נתן הצורה.
Amen.
The second reading is on page 215, the middle verse 27. Ya'amod Aaron Tkayon ben Yitzchak Esther la'aliyah hashemit.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chorban v'kol ha'amid v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Vayavo Yaakov Yitzchak Aviv Amrei Kiryat Arba He Hebron Shakar Sham Abraham Yitzchak ויהיו ימי יצחק 100 שנה ו80 שנה. ויבא יצחק ויאמר ויאסף על עמיו זקן ושבע ימים ויקברו אותו עשיו ויעקב בניו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah v'emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
The third aliyah today is on page 216 at the top. Talmud. Ali?
Do you have Hebrew name?
Actually,
Talmud, you need 5.
There's no Hebrew name? Do you know?
Talmud, you need 5 aliyah hashlishit.
And take the. This on the right here.
Alright. Baruch Adonai HaMorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Let's all of you, Esav, who Edom, Esav lakach et Nashav, even though Canaan et Adah, At Elon, Afitir, Afilama, Vadenam, Yetzibion, Afitir, Basmacha, Yishmael, Kon, Nivayot, Vetel, Dal, Esav, and Eliphaz, Ubasmayal, Dad, Ruel, Yakulamayal, Dad, and Yushviet, Elam, Bekorach, Elaban, Esav, Yaldolo, Beretz Canaan, Vaikach, and Esav, and Ashav, Yabanav, Yabenotav, Bekol Mashobeto, El Miknehu, Bekol Behemato, Bekol Kinehu, Berechush Beretz Canaan, Vayel Yisrael, Mibnei. Mibnei Yaakov Achiv, Ki Haya Rechusham, Rab Yisman Yadav, Yeyolah Eretz Migureihem,
Oseno tam mikne. Miknehem. Oh, sorry, that's one more verse there. Okay. Vayeshev Esav b'har Seir Esavu Edom. Sorry.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'hayei olam notah b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
We're now going to recite a Misha Berach Lacholim, a special prayer for those in need of healing. When I reach the pause, please add any names of those who may be in your thoughts. Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarar Karachov Leah Hu Yivarech V'Yirpeh Et HaCholim. Mindy Zimmerman, Raina Rosendorf, Pam Mina Bat Asna, Menachem Mendel, Yonah Ben Bela Yaakov, Hedy Bat Evelyn, Rachel Bat Eleonora, Joe Tarlo, Aaron Bajda, Zalman Mordechai, Robin Yehudit, Adina Bat Uta, Leonard Rosendorf, Shoshana Bat Toda, Gary Lefkowitz, Howard Lefkowitz, Eric Laxman, Michael Stos, Pesach Ruchel Bat Dina, Tzvi Hirsch Bar Esther, Faith Braunschweig, Deborah Ramirez, Sherwin Liff, Rav Yaakov Ben Esther, Jack Demshik, Dina Bat Reina, Tovan Bat Sarah, Wendy Liu, Fega Leah Bat Deborah, Larry Oppenliner, Sarah Chana Bazisel, Vido Beryl, Vered Chaim Halevi, Shalom Ben Pero, Shalom Ben Sarah, Tov Shlomo Ben Esther, Aviv Mordechai Ben Yathal Bestef, Moshe Ben Tova, Gail Seddon, Sandy Lefkowitz. Other names? Yes, Carol. Sam.
Gary and Selena Adler.
וכל החולים, הקדוש ברוך הוא יהיה לרחמים עליהם, להחזיקם ולרפאותם, ישלח להם מרפא ושמם מן השמיים, רפואתם שרפואת הגוף, שבתים נליזו, ברכה לבוא, השלב הגולה בזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן.
This is the audience participation part. Do I have a volunteer to wrap the Torah?
Who will dress the Torah?
Dress it. Very easy stuff.
Amy? Or is that because Lou's lifting it?
Lou always does it.
Let's
Lou
go.
doesn't make it up. Lou's professional. We don't mess with
it.
it.
Yamod Eliyav ben Yosef uMiriam Hamakbia Talmud Halelet.
Torah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe ki mitzion tetzei Torah bar Adonai mirushalayim ki mitzion tetzei Torah bar Adonai mirushalayim Ki mitzion tetzei Torah udvar Adonai miYerushalayim. 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 May be seated. We're going to open up. We're going to come back to the question I asked you, which is on page 201. Or basically between 200 and 202 in the red books. So, some of you at some point in your Jewish education might have heard someone tell you that the word Yisrael means one who wrestles with God. This is absolutely true. That is absolutely what that means. And often it's interpreted as like, it's really great to be Jewish and to get to like debate about things and to turn them over, and it's about struggling, it's about living. Okay. All of that is true, and this is not a wrestling match where there isn't a clear winner. It's very clear in the story that Jacob wins the wrestling match. Otherwise, he wouldn't get the name. So the way we sometimes use this term of like wrestling implies that like we're all just kind of debating over it and we're never going to actually reach any resolution. But actually, in this case, Jacob wrestles with a man who he learns later is a divine being or an angel, and he beats him. So I'm curious, what do we think that's trying to tell us? That meaning if the name it would be almost like if I said the name of our people is Yisrael, it means one who wrestles with God and wins. So what do we think that that's trying to tell us? When you think about it that way, it's a little bit more problematic to say that you wrestle with an angel and beat them. Steph, are you raising your gun?
Yeah, you forgot what the purpose of the angel or being person a little bit. Right? So it's not like clean it and make this body hit things away. Right? It's about peace and calm with little detail bit.
So fantastic point, right? So you're right, I didn't even mention that part. So it's not a shutout. It's not like a TKO, as they say in boxing, right? He does hurt Jacob a little bit. So there's a part of it where it's not a clear win. Anyone else?
Well, adding to that, sort of, because I don't know the Hebrew understanding the translation, but it says when he saw that he did not prevail, then he elected to inflict pain, which is a weird way to fight if the goal of the fight is to win, you want to score your points early on. So it almost was it a fair fight, was he letting him prevail?
Oh, that's interesting. Is the angel letting him prevail? Yeah. So the sequence of events here is very, it's very unusual. Also, that like it's Jacob who demands the blessing, right? So he asks for a blessing, which also is a weird thing to win at the end of the fight. Like feel like a boxing match or a UFC fight in the octagon where someone wins. It's not like you to compliment me on the way out of the octagon. It's like a strange thing. So like, but symbolically, again, it still begs the question, right? Like, the name of the nation alludes to a person who fights a divine being, and notwithstanding his sciatic nerve, notwithstanding that he doesn't win like in a shutout or in a rout. He does win. Like, what could that be trying to like say to us? Because again, I don't want to like, there's no right answer, but I want to point out that like that's actually like a big deal. It's actually like a very big deal to say like our name comes from the idea that we could fight someone God sends and beat them. This is like not a small theological question. Amy, you want to take a stab at her?
No, I'm stuck on the fact that Abraham fights with God directly. He argues with him in so much more. And he argues and he argues and he argues and he argues. Why did Abraham get redeemed? I'm lost. I'm all on the sidetrack.
So now it's interesting, that's not a physical fight. That's not a physical fight, right? Interestingly, why it's also like a physical fight that like gives him the name is also a weird question, but I'm also gonna have to leave you hanging on like, the question of why we're not called like the nation of Abraham. Sam?
Well, no, but I think the story is the same, right? Abraham meets an angel, a divine voice, tells him to kill his son, dutifully follows, and somehow miraculously wins, right? Is in a struggle, right? A struggle for life, right? And so, whatever. yeah, I mean, maybe we should be named after that, but Jacob has the same structure, right? Right? That there's kind of a like, oh, well, this is our problem, right? Of doing something horrific and being forced to.
That is a fantastic, I've never really thought about it, that it's a fantastic way of looking at the binding of Isaac, that as horrible as an event as it is, you could argue that Abraham wins. Like he goes to the brink, and he goes to the brink so well that the angel has to come and stop him before he goes to the brink. That's interesting. That is. I've never thought about that. I'm gonna have to file that away for next year when we study it. But I don't exactly know what it's trying to tell us about this, but I think that. But I do think it's trying to tell us something very powerful about ourselves. That maybe part of the reason we don't have a lot of answers is because it actually, when you really when you ask it the way I'm trying to ask it, it kind of can make us a little bit uncomfortable. We, in all of our, Jewish texts, and in our prayers, right, we're constantly pointing out how powerless we are in the face of a God, and yet our name involves an ability to make it through the night in a wrestling match and be okay at the end of it. In some sense, I think that's actually a very powerful statement about what God wants to say about our resilience. I think I taught my first year here. Actually, might have been my first Shabbat here. Steve Weisbarth and stuff about how I think it's something you call Jewish people the resilient people. Is actually what really the thread really throughout Jewish history and Jewish texts is getting knocked down and then getting back up again. Looks like you really read this as well.
I'm just wondering, what does it mean to win against divine being? It's only winning because of the generosity against divine being. Presumably, it could have gone if that's how.
Well, that's why the episode is so, has such a, mystical significance and so much commentary about it, and Adam was mentioning it too, is this angel letting Jacob win? Is this really a fair fight? Does the angel want to lose? By the way, later in the book of Exodus, in Sefer Shemot, Moses also wrestled with a strange being. But it doesn't give any special name out of it. So yeah, exactly what it means to win, I guess. I'm using the word maybe it's a little bit provocative. But I do think that there's something powerful about saying don't underestimate your own power, your own capacity to do things. Because you're right, maybe he let him win. But I guess you could say, depending on what you believe about angels and about God, I guess you could argue that if they're so much more powerful than us, they shouldn't have needed to wrestle at all. If the angel could have just zapped him or looked at him funny and then he would fall down. But they still put up a fight. And maybe he wanted him to win. Why do you want him to go through the whole trouble of fighting to make it out of there? Yeah, Rafi?
So I have two things. One, I read it differently than the angel let him win, because verse 26 says, Vayarki lo yachol lo. The angel or the divine being saw that he could not or had not prevailed. And then he takes a cheap shot. He hits him in the hip and takes a cheap shot. And that's the only way that Jacob is injured through the rest of the wrestling match. The other thing I was going to say is we spent this morning earlier talking about words. And here we're talking about actions. And I would say that God wants both from us. God wants us to say the right things and mean it, but also we are a nation, a religion of action. We have actions to do. God says, I don't want your sacrifices, I want you to behave. I want you to do the right thing. So both action and words matter a lot, and we've covered both of those today.
Beautiful. And to sort of bring it into our present day, and again, I'm going to say this recognizing that there's all kinds of problematic elements of it. So I want to make sure that I'm giving that caveat for it, which is, I do think there is something, forgetting about like fighting, whether it's fighting God or fighting an angel, that sometimes we do forget, I think, as sort of like collective Jewish people, that it is okay to win. Like, and again, I'm saying this with caveats here because, there's winning and then there's winning and then there's winning gracefully and winning, humanely. You can insert all of that there, but there is something about being a small people or a small nation where you get conditioned to imagine that, you sort of only exist but for luck and persistence, and it's not possible to win, And I don't think that that's really what, personally, I don't find that's what God wants of me to believe, that it's never possible to win, And again, you can plant your current events or your politics on that however you want, but I do think there's something important to say about it because, one of the hard things, did anyone read Dara Horn's "People Love Dead Jews"?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. I see some nods here. Okay. So I encourage you to read it if you haven't. If you want to read it, you can read it at the synagogue. But her book, which comes out 2 years before October 7th, is basically about how bothered she is by how much adulation and attention Judaism gets about its suffering, and not from anything that's not related to suffering or being near death. Like the example she uses in her introduction is, when I go to a lot of audiences and I ask them to name 5 concentration camps, many people can do that without writing, even if they're not Jewish. If I ask them to name 5 Yiddish writers from like the 19th century, like famous Yiddish writers or famous like rabbinic sages, it's much harder. And her point about it is to say like, there's a lot of conscious awareness of our suffering, and not always necessarily much awareness about our thriving, which again, you'll interpret that however you want, but I do think that there is something in saying like it's okay to win. I feel like I made David and Amy really uncomfortable with this. No? Okay. It's okay, but go.
Try to see if I can pass it. I only have 2 writers.
Oh, 2 Yiddish writers? No, but her point is about both Jewish audiences and general audiences. Like to say like that many Jewish audiences could certainly name for you a lot of historical examples of Jewish suffering, but when you start to ask them for examples of thriving, it becomes much harder. And her argument is also a political argument, which is about that why there's so much anti-Israel sentiment, is that it's not in a sense people don't believe it's okay for the Jewish people to win. Like it was okay to be like on the net. We were like on the brink of suffering, but whenever we're sort of in the power seat, then people hate us. I'll confess I don't know if I buy that entirely, but I do like the metaphor of saying like we do tend to notice a lot about our suffering and less about our thriving. So what does it mean to be okay with sometimes saying we're going to win? Not every time ends with everyone happy. Again, that's place your current events on that however you like. But it is interesting to think about that it's not just about wrestling, it's about wrestling and coming out alive, wrestling and coming out blessed. And again, you'll play with that. We don't have anybody here named Jacob. Anyone here have Yisrael as their? No? Okay, so, but like for anyone who has that as your Hebrew name, it's like there's no way to prove named Jacob that I not aware of, but we have people sitting on page 8.
It's our congregation.
What?
It's our congregation. The story.
Yeah, the Story Center of Israel. You know, which, by the way, you know, occasionally we get some not so nice messages about our synagogue's name. You know, I think it's very much because we have the word Israel in it. That's the name of our nation. The name of our nation long before there was a modern Israel. And so, you know, think about it. Think about what it just means to like wrestle with the idea of winning. What winning means to you. Again, you might tell me that this question made you really, really uncomfortable, and that's okay. You know, you're welcome to my candy in my office, whatever you like. Okay. With that, we're going to do a prayer for our country, a prayer for the state of Israel, and a prayer for the release of the remaining hostages. I'm trying not to get my hopes up that there was like a piece below the fold on the front of the New York Times that said that there's like hope of a hostage deal coming. I feel like I've read that story before, but every time I see it, it doesn't stop me from wanting to believe it's true. So I'm going to choose this week to hope that it's true and that we're close to getting at least that part of this horrible episode resolved. Prayer for our country on page 148. Please rise. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom. Help them fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not let them sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen. Page 149. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, Sor Yisrael V'Go'alo, Marechem Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smikaku Latenu. Again, Aleo Bevrat Chastecha Ufros Aleo Sukat Shlomecha. Ushlach Orchav Yamikal Rashat Sarev Yoatzah. V'Tagneim Be'etzat Tovam L'Panecha. Lezege Yidei Midinei Eretz Kochenu. Bankilei Melaheni Yeshua. Targim Tzachon Tatrem. V'Tatash Shalom Ba'aretz. Zimchat Olam Le'Yoshvea. V'Nomar Amen. Mishaberach Avotena Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov Sarar Karakam Layahu Yivarech Yishmor V'Yinsor Nerei Salagin Ali Yisrael Yishviyav V'Kol Achenu Hanatzmim B'Tzara B'Shivya Ba'avor Shekal Hagav Gadosh Hazad Yipalel Ba'avuram Hagadosh Baruch Hu Yimel Rachamim Aleihem B'Yotzim B'Choshek B'Salmavetz U'Mosratem Yinatek U'Sugotem Yoshem V'Shivem Meira Lachek Mishpachotehem Yodu Lanai Chasdo V'Nivlotav L'Bnei Adam Vikuyam Bahem Mikrash Katuv Bnei Yeshuvunu Batzyor Brina Simchat Olam Arosham Sason V'Simcha Yasigu B'Nasu Yagon Ba'anacha V'Nomar Amen. We remain standing as we return the Sefer Torah on page 153. You want to carry it? Yehalu et Shem Adonai Kiskav Shemo Levado Hodo Al Eretz V'Shamayim Vayarek Kerem Le'amo Tila Lekol Chasinam Libnei Yisrael Akirovo Hallelujah Hallelujah Mizmor LaDavid Habul Adonai Menelim, Habul Adonai Kabod Vaz, Habul Adonai Kibod Shema, Ishtach Habul Adonai V'Hadra Kodesh, Kol Adonai Amayim, Ela Kavod Hirim, Adonai Amayim Rabim, Kol Adonai Ba'Koach, Kol Adonai V'Hadar, Kol Adonai Shomer Arazim, Vaishaber Adonai Et Arzehan, Omer Kinetim Oegel, Levanon B'Sion Kimo Me'emim,
Kol Adonai Kotzei Lavotesh, Kol Adonai Yachil Adonai Mivar Kadesh, Kol Adonai Yachol Elayalot, Vayevasov Ye'arot, Uvehei Chalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Adonai Lamahuya, Shavayeshev Adonai Melech Le'olam, Adonai Oz Yamo Yitei, Adonai Yevorech et Amo Bashalom, Uvnachol Yomar Shuvah. Ki lekachto natati lachem Torati al tazovu et hayini lamachati kinva betokecha melushar dirafecha Darvinoam, Vechol Netivotecha Shalom, Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Kadesh Yameinu, Kekedem. We remain standing on page 155 for the Chatzi Kaddish prior to the Musaf Amidah. Yikadav, Yikadash, Merabah, Yamad, Yigraf, Yerute, Yamlech, Malkute, V'chayefon, V'chon, V'chayefon, V'Yisrael, V'Galav, Yizman, Karim, Imru, Amen. Yesh, Merabah, Mevorach, Le'olam, L'mei, Almaya, Yiparach, Yiparach, Yishtabah, Yiparach, Tamam, V'yitnaseh. Yitadar b'talavi yitzalal shmeni kudsha b'rikule lavin kol birkata b'shirata tushbata v'nechamata damiram yama v'imru amen. Page 156b, we will recite the Amidah together for the Kiddusha on 157. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zoker Chasdei Avod Mevi Goalim Nebneihem L'man Shmo V'Yava Melech Ozer Poked Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Poked Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Nechayim Eitim Atah Rab Lehoshia Mashiva Ruach U'Morid HaGashem Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed Nechayim Eitim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noplim B'Ropech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gudrot Umido Melach Melech Memid Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua V'neman Atalach Hayol Meti Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye Ametim, page 157. Naritzecha v'nakishcha, kisot siach sarpe kodesh, nagishim gaba kodesh, yetuva nevi'echa v'karazeh el zeh v'yamar. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzva'ot, Melech ha'aretz Kivodo. Kivodo malei olam, Mishartav sholim zelazeh. Ayem ekom kvodo lumatam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Adonai, Mimekomo, Lifem Berachamim, V'yachonam v'yachadim Shemo, Erbog v'kol yom tamid, Pamayim v'yava Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hu Eloheinu, Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Hu Yashin Bracham Avsheni, Leinei Kol Chai, Liot Lachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Udivrei Kocheka Katuv Lemor, Yimalach Adonai Leolam, Ayixion, Ledor Vador, Aleluya, Ledor Vador, Ki Godlecha, Unetzach Etzakim B'Rishat Vanakish, V'Shivkacha Elohim Shalom Boed, Shemel Gadol, V'Kadosh Ata Baruch, Ata Adonai, Ha'el Kadosh. We continue quietly, beginning on page 158. Now conclude your Amidah. Please you do so at your own pace. Continue on page 181. Kaddish Shalem. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbav Yamani Rav Gerute v'yamlech malchutei b'chayfonu v'fon v'yedekol Beit Yisrael v'agalav yizman garib imro Amen Yehi shmei Rabbav mevarach V'yalam yamel maya Yibarach Yishtabach Yibarach Ramim Naseh V'yitadar v'talev v'talash minikudsha V'rikulei lavin kol birkatav v'shiratav Shiravanekam Matanaram Yamavimru Amen Gabal Slip of Go Israel Kudamahon Dibishmaya Vimru Amen Yehishlam Rabba Bishmaya V'chayim Elenu V'al Kol Yisrael Vimru Amen Oseh Shalom Ramabu Yaseh Shalom Elenu V'al Kol Yisrael Vimru Amen. We continue on page 182 with In Kelohenu. En Kelohenu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkenu, En Kemashienu, Mi Kelohenu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kemalkenu, Mi Kemashienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkenu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonai, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonai, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheitiru Avot We rise on page 183 and recite the Aleinu quietly. Katubatar tefla Adonai lof le'olam bo'ed v'nemar ve'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. This week, today is the 13th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev. This week we observe the following yard sites here at ACI. Sophia Kostilnik, Max Brecher, Bernard D. Klein, Leo Epsteiner, Dina Cohen, Isidore Block, Julian Walter Fondler, Anna Shapiro, Sarah Leah Schreiberg, Dr. William Kelsey, Hyman Hoffman, Dorothy Stern, Joseph Hauptman, Rebecca Mischler, Alan Sterling, Shlomo Bombs, Ann Rubino, Margaret Epstein, Herman Horowitz, Ethel Kaplan, Esther Eisenberg, Minnie Nadel. Those observing yard site, please rise, page 184 for mourners Kash. Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah v'Yalmad Yivarach Yeruteh v'Yamlich Malchuteh v'Chayechon v'Yomechon v'Chayed Kol Beit Yisrael v'Agalah v'Gizman Karim v'Yimru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Barach Le'olam Lamei Amayah Yibarach v'Yishtabach v'Yipar v'Yitromam v'Yitnaseh v'Yithadar v'Yitalev v'Yitalal Shmei Nekutsha v'Richu Le'elam Kol Mirkata v'Shirata Tishbekata v'Nechamata Damiram B'Yoma v'Yimru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya v'Chayim Aleinu v'Al Kol Yisrael v'Yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom v'Ramav Huyaseh Shalom Aleinu v'Al Kol Yisrael v'Yimru Amen. You may be seated. Great to see all of you this morning on a cold December Saturday like this. To see the shul with lots of people starting here at 9 o'clock just makes me really happy. So I'm delighted you're here. Following Adon Olam, we are having Kiddush in the basement.
They're setting something up down there.
Okay, so it's downstairs. Some weeks it's down there. So please join us, everyone is welcome. A few upcoming events. So tomorrow is our community Hanukkah party, which will start at 2 o'clock tomorrow. There'll be a puppet show and face painting and all kinds of good stuff, some snacks you can buy, and I hope that all of you will consider being here. If you are a member of the synagogue, our annual membership meeting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. If you're like a dues paying member, then you should have received your info about that. That's where we have announcements about the past year, we confirm officers and board members, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, tomorrow is not Hanukkah. We're having a Hanukkah program tomorrow because people are going to start to disperse for those who take vacations during this time. However, during Hanukkah, we still have Shabbat services next Saturday, following Saturday, and during Hanukkah itself, on the 30th of December, we are doing our evening lighting at Catch Astoria, which is like a sports bar. There, you're welcome to join us. It's all on the Friday flyer. And then the following night, the 31st, at 5 o'clock, we're doing the Athens Square Park Hanukkah lighting, which we did last year with klezmer and donuts and all of those things. And you're totally welcome to come to one or both of them. Additionally, if you've seen it in the newsletter, just a reminder that starting the first Thursday in January, I'm going to be teaching a
6-week class once a week online through the Melton School of Adult Jewish Learning on anti-Semitism. The Melton curriculum is really awesome, which is why I'm delighted that we're basically bringing it to Astoria for the first time, like any of their programs. There's a special, if you want to sign up for it, there's a special code in the Friday flyer that will allow the price, which I think the standard price for the course is like $180, to be reduced to $50. Spoiler, the password, the code is Israel50, all one word, but you get it like for a reduced price because we've never offered this course before, and Melton would like us to continue offering it. So if you have any questions, you can ask me about it when we're done. We conclude with any other announcements that I'm forgetting? Okay. We will conclude with the singing of Adon Olam on page 187 and make our way downstairs. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'enasa b'chapso kol azai melech shemoni kra azai melech shemoni kra v'yacharei kiflot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu obed v'hu yiyeh v'tifara v'hu yiyeh v'tifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni leham shilo lehakbira v'lireishi v'litzachni v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra v'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tzur kevli v'yein tzara v'hu nisi umanos li menat kosi v'yom ekra menat kosi v'yom ekra be'ado afkirufi v'yeh tishan v'yayira v'imerufi Yiviyati Adonai li v'lo ira Adonai li v'lo ira. Shabbat shalom, everybody. See you all downstairs. Thank you so much for coming. If you don't recognize someone, please introduce yourself.